US President Donald Trump has suggested that a deal is possible to end the war in West Asia, claiming that America is in talks with a top Iranian official. Iran has denied that any such talks are taking place. But Trump's comments have raised hopes of a resolution. Iran reportedly received a message from the US. According to CBS News, a senior Iranian foreign ministry official said that Tehran has received points for a deal through mediators. But publicly, Iran continues to deny any direct or indirect talks. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai confirmed that messages have been exchanged via friendly countries, but Iran has already rejected them. However, Donald Trump remained positive on the chances of a deal, saying that Iran wants peace. In fact, he's even claimed that there are already 15 points of agreement.
You said there's many points of agreement with Iran right now.
Many.
What, can you give us a
Many,
few of those?
like 15 points. 15
That
points.
Iran has said yes.
Well, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. That's number one. That's number 1, 2, and 3. They will never have a nuclear weapon.
They said yes to that?
They've agreed to that.
But what deal are they talking about here? Well, the contours of any kind of agreement still remain unclear. As you heard, Donald Trump maintains that Iran has agreed not to build a nuclear weapon. Tehran has always denied wanting one as well. The other issue could be zero uranium enrichment. Trump has said that Iran must give up its enriched uranium stockpile. Iran, meanwhile, has repeatedly rejected the idea of zero enrichment.
We're looking for all of the things that we've been talking about. We want to see no nuclear bomb, no nuclear weapon, not even close to it, low key on the missiles. We want to see peace in the Middle East. We want the nuclear dust. We're going to want that. And I think we're going to get that.
Uranium?
We've agreed to that. Yeah, we've agreed to that.
You want the enriched uranium before you can end this
And we
war.
want no enrichment, but we also want the enriched uranium.
Iran, remember, has already outlined its own conditions to stop the war. These 6 core conditions include a new legal framework governing traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and closure of all American military bases in the region. Iran also wants guarantees against further aggression by US and Israel, the payment of reparations for the damages caused during the conflict, prosecution and extradition of individuals associated with anti-Iran media in the West, and a halt to the military operations across all fronts, including against its regional proxies like Hezbollah. Meanwhile, the big question right now is, where does Israel stand? Will it accept a deal between America and Iran? For now, Israel says it will keep striking targets. And here's the ground situation. Strikes were reported at energy facilities in Iranian cities of Isfahan and Khorramshahr. It's not clear who carried out these strikes. As things stand, Trump has announced a 5-day suspension of the strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure, but he has warned that if talks fail, strikes could resume. The same day that the window closes, more U.S. troops are expected to arrive in West Asia. Amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, amphibious landing dock USS New Orleans, and roughly 2,200 Marines will cross into the U.S. Central Command on Friday. It would take another few days for the unit to get to the Strait of Hormuz. All right, let me welcome on the broadcast Mr. Burzin Wagmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOS at the University of London is where he works. Burzin, thanks very much for joining us on WION. 5 working days of no strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. What should we expect?
Well, lull, obviously, in the first instance. And it's always good to have such a hiatus because you can, or in the middle of conflict, it doesn't look abrupt or silly because you always have to recalibrate and reassess. So it's a window for the US and Israel, particularly the US, how to go through. At the same time, Mr. Trump throws the cat among the canaries, as he does, as is so typical of him, by stating that there is someone to talk to on the other side. And as you can tell, that has thrown Tehran into a flurry because the person in question that he has put out, that some discussion has been going on is with the Speaker of Parliament, who is a very powerful figure in his own right. Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf was 3-time Tehran mayor, something of a technocrat, but utterly corrupt, an opportunist, and a hardliner to boot, and knows everyone who matters in the system. He was also a commander of the National Police Force between 2000 to 2005. He's held several posts. He gave way for President Raisi to stand for the election and withdrew his papers, but he did throw his hat into the ring too. So that's his political career, very briefly, Shreya, as to where he's coming from. And Mr. Trump has a penchant for strong men, which would explain why he's put out feelers. And I would also say that Ghalibaf may have coyly put out feelers to DC that he's the man on ground who could get something going, as it were.
No, it's interesting
and
that
a man with impeccable IRGC credentials to boot, so he cannot be questioned by the hardliners as a sellout or seen as a mild-mannered walkover like President Pezeshkian.
So, Burzine, it's interesting that you mentioned Ghalibaf because he's also somebody who's put out on social media that there are no meetings or negotiations taking place between Iran and America. But a lot of people think that perhaps Iran wants to save its face domestically, and that is why the back-channel talks might be going on, but they're denying it publicly. Do you buy that?
Very good question, Shreya. So can we back up a bit to foreground what you just asked me? For the longest time, in the thick of the war, after the first week, on the second week, when Foreign Minister Araqchi started giving interviews to CNN and others, his point-blank comment was, we are in no discussions with DC at all. After talks had, suspended on that fateful Friday evening with the Omani Foreign Minister's interview to CBS, and next morning, attacks started in Tehran breakfast time. But after that, say around the end of second week or the beginning of the third week, there was a back channel established between Araqchi and Witkoff. So there was some stirrings of talk. So again, he had to put a face and say he was not doing so, but the channel had been resumed. Now it would appear Tehran wants to have absolutely nothing to do with Witkoff and Kushner because they don't trust them. And they were asking for Vance to be brought into the discussion. Why? Because Vance was known on the eve of the attacks to be against them, unlike Secretary Rubio and others in the administration. So they think they could have something of a empathic year in having him over. But insofar as Kushner and Witkoff are concerned, they've been through the hoops with them in the past, and they have no confidence in them, despite their proximity to the Oval Office and Mr. Trump.
The fact that you mentioned J.D. Vance, there's a lot of online chatter as well because he hasn't been saying a lot. Perhaps, if you compare it with Marco Rubio or a Stephen Miller or a Donald Trump, he's been saying less on this entire Iran conflict. But let me also shift our focus to Israel, Burzine. The big question, of course, is whether Donald Trump will be able to convince Benjamin Netanyahu of no strikes on the energy infrastructure in these 5 days and heading towards perhaps a diplomatic resolution, if we can still call it that.
Yes, and if we can even still call it a diplomatic resolution after 5 days, because whatever may happen, Shreya, by Easter, this is not the end of the war, or the next bout will take place at some point or the other. And if not that, you can be sure that the Iranian public will come out in protests again. They have been successfully cowed for now, well, partly because they're still in mourning as the bereaved for what has happened, partly also because, once again, the administration has been able to take control of the streets and consolidate its position, which it has always done after every bout of rioting. They are past masters at that. But once again, problems will flare up for the regime. They will not have entire respite from sanctions if they are seeking that. Food inflation is at 82.2%. 28% of Iranians are below the official poverty line as per the Iranian Bureau of Statistics' definition. And problems are still there with an economy in free fall, not to mention water conditions with 20 dams that may well run dry. I mean, Tehran's water supply hovers at about 10%. And that is not incidental, but important to talk about because in all the fray of the heat and light of the fights and conflicts, we've not spoken about other problems among social issues of water, which is a major crisis that the regime will face. So the regime's got its hands cut out, even if it gets a breather from airstrikes as such. But these problems are not going to go away. And it's interesting that if talks are proposed to take place in Pakistan, as we are given to understand, we believe that some negotiations did take place in Islamabad. And for that to have occurred in a delegation to head east from Tehran, permission was sought from the Israelis for clearance of Iranian airspace. I repeat, Iranian airspace, which tells you the US and Israel are completely in control of Iran's airspace and air sovereignty, if you will, at this point in time.
Okay. So let's wait and see how this moves forward. As far as Pakistan and this Islamabad meeting is concerned, there is no official confirmation yet. It's still in the realm of speculation. But if it did happen, of course, Pakistan has its own vested interests, which are not related to peace, because of which they are heading towards this entire conflict and trying to be the mediator. But Burzeen, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your perspective on WION.
Thank you.